Hello and welcome back to Overclock Workshop. This week well, on the day I'm recording, it's not this week, it's not the week of release. Uh, this will come out, oh yeah, it will come out next week, okay, because I was like 2 episodes ahead for a time, which by the way is my explanation for why the cluster grenade one was so terrible, because I did 2 in a row and I realised that was a bad idea. Not that I'm not recording 2 videos in a row. I'm literally just off the back of recording the first first video for Below Decks at Ghost Ship, so which was pretty cool, by the way. But back to the Overclock Workshop, sort of on the final, not the final stretch. We're in the last we're more than halfway, like solidly over halfway. We've got 6 more to go, including this one, and then it's over. The grenade ones are over. So what do we do here? Let me very briefly go over it again. We're just going to take a look at these old ideas for grenade overclocks I came up with way back when, and see first of all how good they are, whether they have their applications in other areas, possible base improvements to the grenade, and also entertaining a hypothetical scenario of actually getting grenade overclocks or modifications. And so first of all, I'm going to say hi, and then we're going to dive into it with the clean, which I wonder if you can guess what they are by the icons. I don't know, maybe you can. Anyway, let's get to it. So, dwarf-friendly gas. This is a really basic one, in my opinion. Well, I'll explain it first. So you have increased visibility in neurotoxin clouds, and they deal greatly reduced damage to dwarves. So you and your teammates. Visibility in clouds should just be they don't decrease visibility as much, and shouldn't have anything to do with being in them. It should just make it so it's not as dense of a particle effect. So it's much more translucent, basically. You really can't see through the clouds from outside them. We should be able to see through them. In my opinion, this really, based in the current game, should come in the form of a perk of some kind, possibly even elemental insulation. I believe it doesn't affect this because the wiki doesn't indicate that it does. So what that could really come down to is elemental insulation itself just not being exactly what it should be. It should cover all elements, basically. And it really doesn't. There's a lot that it misses out, and a lot of it actually has to do with the different damage types that enemies use. For example, Acid Split is a great example where you do actually resist the damage over time somewhat, but you don't resist the initial hit because for some reason the initial hit deals direct damage instead of poison damage anyway. Things like that. So really, this should be rolled into a proper overhaul of that perk, which will probably come when we get the actual perk overhaul / rework. So that could go there. But at the same time, maybe the Neurotoxin grenade. See, that's the damage part I was just talking about. Increased visibility, maybe that should just be a part of it in general. The Neurotoxin grenade, I didn't really give any sort of briefing on it. It really is in a bad spot. In my opinion, it's the worst driller grenade. I think it is also the weakest. I think there are good reasons to use the Ripper. And there are definitely really good reasons to use the HE. Obviously, the Axe is still reigns supreme, but HEs are good. Rippers have a niche. Neurotoxins, in my opinion, kind of fall behind. And one of those things I think is they become an obstacle in a lot of scenarios. Not that Rippers don't, so maybe there's some kind of character there. But at the same time, it's still going to be an obstacle even if we can see through it. It's still going to represent an area of damage for dwarves. Obviously, if this overclock was added literally, then that wouldn't be a problem. But honestly, making it easier to see through them should probably be something that's just changed to the base Neurotoxin grenade. So I would posit that as a change, and also the second aspect, the reduced damage, actually to be a part of. Well, first of all, friendly can already alleviate this, but part of elemental insulation as well. At the same time, the Neurotoxin grenade is, like I said, it's just a bit of a hazard for some people rather than an actual boon. I think a lot about the armor upgrades where Engineers is supposed to be a hazmat system, and if I had to guess, if it works properly, then it should work on this. But I'd wager it probably doesn't. So these really are 2 things that should be like sort of applied in other areas of the game. The next 2, maybe not so much. They really are sort of a thing of their own. Self-immolation is probably the most literal neurotoxin grenade overclock. Really can't be applied to anything else. Although Now that I think about it, now that I've said those words, I've immediately realised it's not true, and I'll get to that. Self-immolation is supposed to be a balanced one. The neurotoxin cloud ignites itself at the end of its life cycle, and the actual ignition, like explosion, when it's ignited and it sort of explodes into fire, it actually deals a little bit more damage as well. To make up for the fact that we actually have a shorter neurotoxin cloud lifetime, but also a weaker slowdown effect on the neurotoxin as well. Apparently, this isn't from Borderlands. True, it's from Titanfall. You might be aware of Scorch from Titanfall, the best Titan. Has these gas canisters that you can ignite, so it's already pretty similar to what we got going on here. But even then, there's an upgrade, a Titan kit that you can equip for Scorch that makes it so the gas canisters ignite themselves. That's basically what this is. At the end of its life cycle, it can be used for a lot of things. I think this, if we take it literally, allowing it to reach the end of its cycle sort of makes it a powerful sort of slow enemies down, even if the slowdown is weaker, sort of slow enemies down and catch them in this powerful blast. It can also just be used as a better sort of flash attack grenade that you can very quickly ignite it, and it actually is stronger than it used to be. But I would say a big reason for this to be actually be a decent idea is because only really use neurotoxin grenades with 2 of Driller's weapons. You're sort of limited. You've got to use the flamethrower, or you have to use the EPC with Burning Nightmare. You have to use that upgrade as well specifically. So you are fairly limited in being able to actually ignite the neurotoxin grenade, and one that does it itself actually opens up a lot of possibilities. It makes it more viable for other weapons, but also some specific stuff like temperature shocking with the cryo cannon, and with the wave cooker, as well as even some smaller stuff like Sabata, where you might be taking Sabata with probably a cryo cannon one, where you might not know what tier 5 to use, and you could still use volatile bullets. It could still work in some scenarios. I would still in general recommend blow through now for the Sparta and the cryo cannon, but that could still be a thing as well. And even then, sludge pump as well. It'd be great for the sludge pump igniting lots of puddles at once as well. So it would have a lot of uses there. How would you actually implement this though for the neurotoxin grenade itself? Yeah, that one's a little bit awkward. You really couldn't make it a base feature. So if we're going to go literal, if we're going to go off what we're actually looking at here, we kind of need grenade overclocks to be a thing. So that's dealing in hypotheticals, but I think I made a good case despite that. The other thing I thought of is actually, and it may have been one of the. Actually, no, it wasn't. It was one I was considering. I would be surprised if anyone remembers or had actually watched the original Overclock workshops for the weapons when we did the sludge pump one. I remember considering self-immolation for the puddles as an overclock. It could have been a clean. It probably could have been a clean, because basically it would make it so that all the puddles had a chance of setting themselves on fire after they make contact with the ground. Like a 20% chance or something. So chances are at least one of your puddles, maybe even 2 from every charge shot, would set alight. So that's actually an area where we could see it, because obviously the sludge pump is a weapon, therefore has overclocks, therefore could get more in the future. That could also actually, maybe even better, be a tier 5 upgrade, given that all 3 of the driller primaries are actually left without a third option, and that's something that needs to change in my opinion, especially with how honestly the flamethrower and the cryo cannon ones could be completely overhauled, like in the sense that it's fragile and targets explode on death. What a name. Those 2 are considered generally useless by the community, and I kind of agree. And then cold radiance and heat radiance are so good that they really probably should be a part of the base weapon, and then you should be able to upgrade it with so it should be a nerfed version, should be part of the base weapon. You should be able to upgrade it with the tier 5 upgrade. So, but yeah, self-immolation as a concept, I think it exists very well within the hypothetical that we talked about, but also possibly as an idea for a sludge pump overclock. It's really the only thing that would truly you'd be able to get something out of that. Nothing else aside from the neurotoxin grenade and the sludge pump produce things that can be ignited by the dwarves, as in it's something that the dwarves can produce that you can then ignite. I wish platforms could be ignited. That'd be nice. Yeah. Also, if we could actually self-immolate sludge pump puddles, imagine how cool that would be to use a temp shock wave cooker with the sludge pump. I mean, it'd be stupid, but it'd be pretty cool. So yeah, there's that. So we might as well just get this over and done with the unstable. This one's also from Titanfall. This is electric smoke. Um, Greatly increased damage per tick in the form of electric damage and also a stronger slowdown effect. But you can't ignite it, and it reduces player movement speed accordingly while in the cloud, and disrupts communication devices, which I've acknowledged might be impossible. That was supposed to be sort of like it would make like mission controls announcements unclear. It would mean you can't really use your map or your laser pointer properly, which you can kind of just ignore. I think that's a really cool idea for a warning. On the other hand, if I ever did another mutators workshop, volume 2, that would probably be the warning. But either way, this is probably the one that makes the most sense as a new grenade. For who? Well, probably engineer, let's be honest. Although when it came to trying to create this electric smoke idea for the neurotoxin grenade, when I was doing that, I sort of thought I kind of want to do electric smoke, but I don't want to actually use electricity in the traditional sense. I don't want it to actually electrocute enemies. Maybe it would still have the icon, but as you can see, I've divided it into simply making the neurotoxin grenade deal electric damage with every tick, and just making it a stronger slowdown effect. So the actual slowdown effect is minus 30%, so this actually brings it up to minus 80% and increases the DPS of the thing itself, which is why we can't ignite it. And we're going to be making up for that damage as well. I reckon this makes it more independent as well. It doesn't really need to be paired with the flamethrower to make it good. In fact, it's kind of the opposite, or at the very least, there's no real synergy there. So there's definitely that going on. I can imagine it being more useful, possibly for boss enemies, mainly because of the slowdown, not because of the damage. The damage is still done in a way where it can affect any enemy because it's just electric damage per tick, not an electrocution effect. Obviously, there's lots of things like pressers and pretty much all boss enemies can't be electrocuted, but they can still take electric damage if that's what's being done. They do resist it somewhat, but if it's just ticks of electric damage, they can't it still occurs. The slowdown effect would of course be very useful. I like this idea a lot because, in my opinion, it's really only the sludge pump that truly plays into lockdown, area lockdown. And I think what a lot of people maybe don't realize is that it's not exactly Driller's thing, or at least you can easily avoid it. You can do it on the flamethrower, but you really have to spec into it. You can't really do it on the cryo cannon, and you can avoid it on the sludge pump. So I think a grenade that really accommodates for area lockdown effects would be quite nice for a lot of Driller builds. Not a majority, but quite a few. Although, in my opinion, another thing that people don't really realize is that the Ripper kind of is supposed to be that. Obviously, that doesn't utilize slowdown, which this does heavily. And the Neurotoxin grenade already does, but I think for the purposes of area denial, it needs a bit of a boost. In that same vein, I mentioned that if we're not doing hypotheticals, then the only real option here is for this to actually be a pitch for an engineer grenade, which I don't have a huge problem with. I guess you could call out how lingering effects are already kind of a theme of his grenades, given that two of them, the lure stays in place and attracts enemies, the proximity mine stays in place and detonates when there are enemies nearby. This would sort of stay in place and just damage anything that comes through. Would be pretty effective in large open spaces as well, because with the way how big these clouds are, on average, they're sort of tall enough where actually at the average height, Macteras would be affected by it. So got that going for it as well. So electric smoke as an engineer grenade could be cool. This is also one that I do think actually has some standing though, as a hypothetical neurotoxin grenade overclock as well. Same with the previous one. So I think we've covered some good applications for the ideas themselves, as well as given some good standing if we are somehow dealing in that weird hypothetical scenario that we know will never happen. So I think I did an okay job here actually explaining these, and that has something to do with the ideas of holding weight. They don't all have that, and that might come to be that might come up again. Not every idea I came up with is perfect, which is why I'm sort of just pushing through this series to sort of get it over and done with. I still do enjoy doing it to a certain extent, but it doesn't feel like there's a particularly strong point to it, which might sound strange to admit while actually like in the video itself, but I'm comfortable admitting that. I just don't want these ideas to go to waste. I sort of made them a while ago and I really believed in them, so I'm going to continue to share them until they're gone. So with that all being said, hold on. If you did enjoy this episode of the Overclock Workshop, thank you very much. Thank you for watching. I think I did it wrong. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy, you can like and subscribe if you like. If you want to see more of this, if you want to stay up to date with all Deep Rock Galactic related news, patches, and behind the scenes looks, then feel free to click the bell as well. It'll do you good and it'll do me good. Win-win situation, I hope. Either way, that's all for today. Thank you once again. Take care.